The benefits of cloudification of the RAN are clear. The next step is removing the obstacles of deploying ORAN and a disaggregated production network, which is really critical for 5G growth, automation, network orchestration, 5G network slicing, and a myriad of other considerations lend themselves to simplifying cell site deployments that for 4G, 5G, and future generations of mobile technology. Joining this session are Juniper Networks' Constantine Polychronopoulos. He's Group Vice President of 5G and Telco Cloud. Next is AT&T's Robert Soni. He's VP RAN Technology. And last is Mehran Hadipour. He's Vice President of Business Development and Tech Alliances, that at Rakuten Symphony. And gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Great to be here. Great to have you. Great to be here in Barcelona once again. Exactly a year ago, Constantine and I had the pleasure of talking about ORAN, Open RAN, and all sort of the tangential topics. Now we're here a year later. We want to see what has developed. Rob, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. Certainly AT&T, big proponent of ORAN, and again, those tangential technologies. Where do you see ORAN right now, and really the adoption of ORAN?
So I think that there are a lot of successes that we can point to, specifically that have come out of the work that's been done by the ORAN Alliance over the last few years. We see, major shift in product definition and product direction from a number of suppliers like Juniper, for example, where they've invested heavily in products that frankly wouldn't have existed if ORAN did not come to fruition. We now see products that are making open front haul available. So this, for us, we look at really 3 or 4 major success points. Open front haul now has allowed us to disaggregate the network, to separate and choose best of breed on radio versus baseband. We also see that there is now a new industry now being created around service management and orchestration with a lot of new players out of non-traditional software backgrounds for telco now entering the business and providing software that allows networks to scale with great complexity. So another success point, and of course, massive investments by silicon providers out there who have now developed silicon specifically targeted for virtualized RAN, ORAN kind of deployments. So there's really a lot of things that we can point to as success, and opportunities for us as operators to now look at how we deploy networks and what we can do with them.
Mehran, last year, or this time last year, you and I talked about ORAN and maybe what we would be talking about a year later, and here we are. What are some solutions over the past year that you've come across for scaling ORAN and the wider adoption of ORAN?
That's a great question. Maybe even a year ago, people were wondering how real ORAN is, what is the actual benefit of it, why even do it, where are the cost saving coming from. But I think this is far beyond the test. We have deployed 46,000 sites, actively radiating over 300K radios, 90% coverage in RMI, all open standard RAN, on cloud, and a lot of things that enable that is beside the RAN itself is orchestration and automation, end-to-end provisioning, from site planning all the way to the deployment. Everything has to be automated. We've been able to show that we can reduce the deployment time of a RAN node by 80%. So this is the only way you achieve the growth. And post-deployment, the operation savings of 30% plus in terms of being able to operate the network proves that RAN and Open RAN is really the way to go. I don't think there's a question anymore of how real the RAN is and how should be deploying it. We see a lot more momentum across the operators focusing on Open RAN, and in addition to agility and TCO savings, you're now opening up an open platform for continuous improvement, additional capabilities, being able to deploy additional services at the edge and so on.
Constantine, again, this time last year, we talked about the RIC. In fact, it was with Rakuten. That was a very interesting conversation. There was some, I wouldn't say debate, but there was discussion around where we would be, again, a year later, we're talking about RIC development. So where are we on that?
Great progress over the last year, right? And as a matter of fact, we did announce a strategic partnership with Rakuten, with our RIC now powering the SIM world. Oran democratizes the radio access network. It's a paradigm shift in multiple dimensions, right? And the RIC is what I call the operating system of the radio. It opens up basically the radio to software, to innovation, to software solutions that allow us to address everything from optimization, new business, and opening up the possibility of offering new business use cases or deploying new business use cases in a simplified way in the radio, monetizing the radio for the first time, but most importantly, deploying applications that address everything from user experience to energy efficiency and TCO as well, total cost of ownership, right? So it's really a paradigm shift on the software, being able to really re-architect the radio access network to be software driven, open, and more agile, more dynamically, managed. So it's really a new era, and we feel very excited. Now the RIC is absolutely essential to realize some of these use cases. For example, network slicing. I feel very strongly about network slicing. It's really probably the most compelling way to monetize the radio access network. You cannot have network slicing without the RIC, because the RIC is what enables us to manage user experience over the last and most important mile, which is over the air, right? The RIC is also what gives you hooks into the way the radio, how the spectrum is managed across multiple users, multiple use cases, etc. So an extremely important component of the Oran architecture. And we have seen here at Mobile World Congress this year, we have seen tremendous progress on adoption, not necessarily commercial yet, but it's getting there slowly. We announced with Vodafone what I believe is the industry's first announcement of a successful field deployment of the RIC, of the Juniper RIC with parallel wireless radio, and a number of applications coming from partners as well as our own X apps and R apps. And we concluded that at the end of last year, and we made an announcement with Vodafone. So that was a breakthrough. Next, step is to see commercial, deployment, if not, at large, at least limited, and leaders here in the space like Soni are catalysts. They have to really push the envelope along with vendors like Juniper to make it happen faster.
That's a very good segue into the next question, Rob. Can we ask you about AT&T's plans around RIC developments? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what we can talk about pretty boldly or pretty broadly is that, there are two RICs for us. There is a non-real-time RIC, which is integrated into what we would previously have called the OSS layer of our network, but now is linked to what we are calling service management and orchestration layer of our network. So the non-real-time RIC for us is sort of table stakes for what we will put in as a platform that will enable third-party innovation as well as AT&T-owned innovation to run applications that can manage the network performance and also provide additional exposure and visibility into the network on a sort of longer time scale. There's also a lot of interest for us in particular, and we're doing trials with a particular vendor right now, a large-scale trial on the near real-time RIC. We've talked somewhat publicly about that, and for the near real-time RIC, we are looking very carefully at use cases that essentially allow us to more intelligently manage traffic, as well as do energy savings and provide some insight, again, into the network in a different way, because we have exposure to a set of metrics that generally aren't visible to us through this sort of standard FCAPS model where data comes every few minutes or every 15 minutes. We now have visibility down to the millisecond level potentially. We're debating a lot about the scale point and the right scale point for us to be able to operate and consume that much data, but potentially just a significant difference in just being able to consume data that's available on the seconds level as opposed to something that's available on the minutes or hours level. So we see a lot of opportunities, I think, around the further optimization of network slicing, especially dynamic network slicing as it gets rolled out into the network, and policy management around those slices. There's opportunity there. So I think there's a lot of different use cases. The advantage is that we no longer are limited based on what we, AT&T, can deliver. So we've had platforms for years that were sort of pre-ORAN-ish that supported this kind of innovation, but we largely had to develop the applications ourselves, and we didn't necessarily have a well-published or well-agreed-upon API and SDK that other third-party developers could ultimately build on. So now we're really looking forward to, in this open world, that we'll be able to leverage what we can get from the rest of the ecosystem.
Mehran, anything to add before I move on?
I think the whole concept of post-deployment management of the network and coverage infrastructure, from RIC all the way to things like auto-healing, auto-scaling, operational management, the level of automation you can deliver is now enabled primarily by having an agile cloud infrastructure that could give you end-to-end monitoring from hardware all the way up. So it goes. You can do a lot of things on automation and optimization that you couldn't do post Oran. It makes you far more capable of managing how network services are delivered, what are the operations use cases of those network services, how much efficiency you can deliver, and so on. So RIC is basically the icing on the cake.
Go ahead.
Did you say the RIC is the icing on the cake? I would call it, the cake between the layers of the cake. I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. But I agree with you. The RIC, going back to what Rob said, we would love to see, for example, Rob spoke about the ability to do sub-millisecond level modulation on the radio access network, right? So how about if we get to a point where the operator has the ability to manage how the scheduler manages the spectrum, right? Which is something that so far vendors have kept very close. It's the holy grail of the major NEPs. We want to democratize that. We want to bring it up to the application, or at least have hooks into the scheduler to build new intelligence to enable and bring to bear AI ML that will allow us to bring new levels of optimization, right, through closed loop feedback, closed feedback loop optimization. So the sky's the limit as to, the level of new efficiencies that Oran can bring to bear, as well as new business models, I believe, eventually, where operators can start monetizing either differentiated user experience, private mobile, eventually through cloud, through network slicing. There is an ocean of new opportunities that I think in the next 10 years we will see becoming reality eventually. But one step at a time, and it's very encouraging to see progress, significant progress in the acceptance of Oran, the adoption of Oran, and finally operators trying to dip their feet in the water with Oran deployment, starting slowly and hopefully accelerating in the next couple of years.
Constantine, I want to stay with you and then go down the line and maybe get some comments. As far as simplifying ORAN deployment and maybe optimizing total cost of ownership, that type of thing, can you walk us through maybe an example of that so that people that are watching this can get a concept of what that simplification might look like? Something maybe specific to Juniper networks.
Yeah, so overall, Oran eliminates a lot of the hardware closed proprietary appliances in the RAN, right? One example, concrete example, I can refer to the Juniper cell site router. This is a containerized cell site router which eliminates an external box, right, from the cell site that is fully integrated on the platform that runs the DU or the CU or both. So it's managed from a common management plane, purely software, solution. You can scale it up, you can scale it down. You cannot do that with an external box. You have to plug in a real router, configure it with the DU, the box that runs the DU, etc. So it addresses simplification of the network, architecture, total cost of ownership, easier management, right? So that's a concrete example. Overall, Oran, the shift towards cloud-native solutions, leveraging Kubernetes, the native auto-scaling that comes with Kubernetes, software-driven everything, enables us to get to the point where we can have intent-based definition of use cases and orchestration, which is really the end goal, I think.
Yeah.
And the RAN was the last bastion. Oran makes that now fair game for innovation and software-driven solutions.
Rob, anything to add as far as simplifying Oran deployment?
Yeah, I think we have been looking very closely at this problem. AT&T's been building networks for 147 years. It's something we are very prideful of. So we understand what the costs are associated with building networks for a variety of different deployments, and we started on the journey towards disaggregation and virtualization on core and transport more than 10 years ago. Our core now is fully virtualized, and significant portions of our transport are now fully virtualized. So we understand quite well where the pros and cons of moving forward with a disaggregated and virtualized network will go. Of course, the benefit of having open interfaces is really what we've understood is the true benefit of where you get ultimately the cost benefit. So as you open interfaces, that gives you the opportunity to make choices and expand your ecosystem and choose a hardware provider, a CAS provider, a network function provider, a network management layer in independent fashion. But it also allows you to scale your network management from systems which are dependent or bespoke for each individual vendor into a common system that can address the entire network. All of this ultimately drives down the total cost of operating the network. And for us, the key is, as we get past the sort of sourcing question and hardware optimization question, is we are looking for how do we deal with the fact that we now have a much more complex network than we did in the 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G era. 5G has brought with it a lot of capability, but also a lot of complexity. And where teams are probably smaller, the operational side, than they were in the 4G era or the 3G era. And we continue to have pressure to try to figure out how to optimize the size of those teams relative to the amount of work that's present for them. So that's where we look forward to the opportunities that are afforded by, essentially, when you go forward with open interfaces and with disaggregated networks in terms of automation and orchestration. And this is a theme that I'm hearing all the time now at Mobile World Congress. It's every talk we go to, every vendor we meet to makes a pitch about what can they do to automate rather complex workflows and make them simple. Remove hands from keyboard, basically.
Yeah. Mehran, anything to add? Maybe simplifying ORAN deployment, disaggregated production networks, and maybe even cloud-native adoption being a precursor to doing that.
I think this, if you think about what has been happening on the cloud delivery and as a service delivery in the enterprise and cloud side of things, there's a lot of lessons learned around simplification, modernization, and the agility that enables not only faster delivery of service, but also how you manage the service. So if you think about what we deploy today in the G-Node B side, in the number of components reduced to 2, for example, and then go up the stack, and everything that's cloudified and containerized and modularized and open interfaces, and the fact that we can do zero-touch provisioning from the point in time that something shows up at the far edge and plugged in all the way to the point that is running the service without touch. This would not be possible without cloudification and containerization, right? So the cloud is a major component of how you achieve simplification, and also automation that you build on top of it could allow you to reduce the deployment time significantly. We've done 80% reduction in deployment. And post-deployment, how you do things and manage the network, coverage, scaling and healing automation, protection, all of those things not only require simplification, it also operationalizes simplification. Obviously, it's something that changes the way you operate your network, right? You should not be deploying anything manually. Yeah. Everything has to be pre-provisioned. Automation is a key factor toward achieving simplification.
Again, I want to go down the line on this. Constantine, I'll start with you. As far as management and the orchestration of the network and the challenges around that, again, sitting here this time next year, what topics should we be talking about, and what challenges do you foresee over the next 12 months?
So my end goal is to help our partners and customers to be able to stand up a complex use case from the orchestration point of view, as complex as an MVNO, which is a mobile virtual network operator, with all the applications, and I say stand up, orchestrate a planet scale MVNO in a couple of hours, right? Without having, and I mean planet scale, I mean, beyond the US, go to, another continent, expand your brand to another continent without having to ship boxes, without having to set up, macro cells, etc. Just strike a RAN sharing deal, commercial deal with a local provider, and leverage clouds, leverage on-prem, assets, public clouds, etc., and stand up a use case. So that's extreme automation. Eventually, we'll get there. As a matter of fact, hyperscalers have managed to do that to some degree across their own regions. I think the technology is maturing, and Oran is a catalyst in us getting there, and including the way we manage the radio access network, pretty much in the same way we manage cloud assets, to be able to bring extreme automation, intent-based provisioning and deployment of resources, physical, virtual, and workloads in an intent-based way across any type of geography, okay, at scale. I think we're going to see a realization of that in the next year or two.
Rob, do you sort of mirror those sentiments?
Well, I'm looking forward to coming here again a year from now, and hopefully I'll get used to seeing so many people again. And I think we're going to be. It's going to be a very busy year for us at AT&T this year with the number of trial activities and new programs we're launching that are specifically around benefiting from what we're getting from the Oran ecosystem. Whether it is mix and match on radio, or it is new network management platforms, or the RAN itself and virtualization of the RAN, as well as the RAN intelligent controller trials that we're running. It's going to be a very busy year for us. So we really, hopefully a year from now, we're going to be looking back on a fairly significant set of understandings of what we think is actually possible and in the art of possible for migrating a brownfield network forward to ORAN, and what challenges come specifically with that. What I think we'll hear a lot more about is, now that we have this and it's sort of table stakes, that this is the new architecture that we've invested in for the future, how to leverage that architecture in a different way, whether it's with monetization or it's finally with the expansion and the usage of AI and ML. So I expect to see that as sort of a big theme next year, because these platforms will now have reached maturity and now be available, and people will really be looking to try to leverage technologies that we're seeing in other businesses for other use, really come directly and directly impact our portfolio and our investment on anything from network management to even how we implement and deploy RAN.
Mehran, certainly CSPs have a lot to look forward to in the space, but also have a lot of challenges as well, clearly. So where do you stand on that over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think I was going to kind of echo what I just heard. I think next year, let me be bold in saying that it will be far beyond connectivity. We're going to start talking about delivering more than just network, virtual reality, application as a service. Operators would now have the tools to be able to do a lot more for their end customers beyond just providing 5G. I think the infrastructure that's there is open, can adopt applications, can deliver applications as a service. You can now deploy a number of new things much more faster in an agile way, just like a cloud, and be an app provider for your enterprise customers, or deliver AVVR solutions, or digital twin solutions, or 4H, or smart city solutions. All those infrastructure built on top of Oran now gives you a service delivery mechanism that is adaptive, can onboard new services, can be used to monetize those new services, and now is not just far beyond ARPU of $10, $20, or $100. There's a lot more things that operators are going to be doing now, as early as next year, on delivering new and modern services on top of the infrastructure that is open and agile.
the RAN space, Open RAN, is such an exciting sector to talk about and certainly to work in. You folks work in it, I just talk about it. But it's always nice to revisit it more than once a year, but in this space here, once a year, and it's good to hear from you guys and see where the advancements are. Constantine, I wanted to say thank you to you first for participating.
Thank you.
Always great
Pleasure
to have
to be
Juniper
here.
Networks on our sessions.
Thank you.
Rob, Soni, first
Thank
time
you.
we've been doing this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so we really appreciate your time, really. Mehran, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A pleasure
It was
to
great.
spend time
Pleasure.
with you.
Thank you.